Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little for PokerNews.com, and today we have another hand from the second table of a $1,500 buy-in shootout. Again, we have to win our table. The goal is to win all the chips. There are no payout jumps until you win. So, let's try to win. Blinds are 400, 800. We get 9, 8 of spades, under the gun, +1. This is a situation where I am essentially always raising, but I do not think it's mandatory. I think folding is actually fine and reasonable. But I really do like having a few low suited connected hands in my range because that's going to give you better board coverage. Meaning, say you open only the best made hands and the best pairs and the best high cards like ace, jack, and better from early position. Well, if the flop comes 9-8-5, you just can't have anything, right? The best hand you can have is aces. And if you think about, let's say, a big blind calling range on 9-8-5, well, they have all the sets, they have lots of two pairs, they have lots of straights. So even though your range is very strong, your opponent has way more nut hands than you, and that puts you in a pretty dicey spot. So a way you can help mitigate that a little bit is to add a few of the suited connected hands to your range, like 9-8, 8-7, 7-6 suited. These are fine hands to add in. Realize you're only adding in 4 combinations of hands for each of them, which really isn't that many because there's only 4 suits, right? We have 9-8 spades, hearts, diamonds, clubs. It's not like we're adding in all the offsuit ones. And I think this is a very nice thing to do to make you generally more difficult to play against because your range is going to be wider and is going to connect better with all flops as opposed to just, low card and very high card flops. So we open it up to 2,200. I also would shy away from this a little bit if I was playing against very good aggressive players because they're going to be 3-betting you a lot more and you really don't want to get 3-bet. If you think your opponents are not going to 3-bet, you can actually open much wider than normal because the worst thing that can happen to you when you have garbage is to raise, get 3-bet, and have to fold it. You don't want to fold. Folding is very, very bad. All right, we see the flop 3 ways. And we flop a pair and a flush draw. Okay, so in this scenario, a lot of people just blindly bet because they have a pair and a draw and they think that that is great. And it is a great hand. The problem, though, is if we end up playing a big pot, so we bet someone raises and we go all in and they call, what are they going to have? Well, they're going to have either a flush draw with overcards, which is fine against us. They're going to have a king, which is fine against us. Or they're going to have a hand like king 9 that's actually in pretty good shape against us, or a set. So if we play a big pot, we're not actually loving the situation. But if we play a small pot or a medium pot, we're often pretty happy. So in this situation, you have to ask, do I want to bet with all of my range? And I would say multi-way, you probably just don't. Like say I opened 8-7 of hearts and it comes king 9-2. Do I really want to bet everything? The answer is obviously no. So we know we don't want to bet everything on king 9-2, so I need to check some hands. Like 8-7 of hearts, right? I know I'm check folding 8-7 of hearts. So I want to also make sure I have some hands that can very easily check call on multiple streets, which are going to be hands like 9-8 with a flush draw. It may be some of my ace-high flush draws, although maybe you just want to bet those. And it's going to be some hands like king 10 that are good, but if a lot of money goes in the pot, again, may not be so ideal. If I have king 10, I just check, call, check, call, check, call. We're never folding. If I have 9-8 of spades, we check, call, flop, check, call, turn, check, fold, river, if our opponents bet off very often. So that's the plan. Notice that we are folding out some portion of our range on each street, but we're also calling a large chunk of our range on each street, and that's going to make us difficult to exploit by blind aggression. You always want to make sure when you're playing against competent players that you are not easy to take advantage of by simply betting. So this hand I think is quite nice to check because we know we're not folding it on the flop and we know we're not folding it on the turn. And as an added benefit, sometimes we're going to have a flush on the river or by the river, and our opponents are going to often think, well, he would bet his flush draws, so he probably doesn't have a flush, which will lead them to try to bluff, essentially representing that they have a lot of flushes in their range. And they may have a lot of flushes in our range, but it doesn't matter if we're sitting here with a flush, right? So I like checking. If this board was a little bit, like if our 9 was instead a 6 and I had like 7-6 of spades, however, I probably would bet. And I think 9-8's actually right on the cusp between betting and checking. As your pair is less susceptible to being outdrawn, you should be less inclined to bet with it. Right, so like say it's king, queen 2 and I have queen, jack of spades. I'm only worried about an ace, right? Every other card is fine. So I should almost certainly check that. Here, I do have to worry about ace, queen, jack, and 10 that are not spades. So there are some cards I'm unhappy about. Like checking 10-9 of spades would be better than checking 10-8 of spades, right? Because that's one fewer card that I have to worry about. So that's something to keep in mind, but I still think this one's good enough to check. But if this was a more multi-way, for example, I would be more inclined to bet because then I'm more concerned with protecting against the various turn cards. But three ways, I think it's fine to check. It does go check, check, check on the flop, which is a bit of a bummer. You don't really mind if your opponent's bet. Turn gives me a flush. Hello. You always want to get a flush. So now, whenever you're betting in this spot, you want to ask, well, first things first, you pretty much always want to bet with your best made hands and some draws that lack showdown value. So what are the best made hands? Well, flushes, obviously, and we have that. So we know we're betting. Next, what are the bluffs that lack showdown value? I think it's going to be stuff like queen of spades, jack, queen of spades, 10. Maybe queen, jack of spades 10. I think those are reasonable to bluff. That's probably going to be about it. I don't really want to bet ace high at this point. Like say I have ace of spades, queen. If I bet ace of spades, queen and get called, well, I'm probably behind. But if it just checks down, I actually win a lot of the time. And it's pretty nice to have some ace of spades in your range whenever the fourth spade comes on the river. So I'm probably not bluffing here all that, or I'm not betting here all that often. But when I am betting, it's going to be pretty polarized to like flushes and nothing. So I do go for a bet. I think I could actually even bet a little bit bigger. When you are very polarized, meaning you have mostly good hands, like really good hands or junky draws, you can bet on the big side. And that is kind of what I do here, but I think I could go even a little bit bigger, like 6,000. All right, hijack calls. His calling range is probably consisting of mostly kings. Maybe the hands like queen of spades with a gut shot. Maybe ace of spades with a gut shot. Or no, I guess it could be with a gut shot, but probably isn't. People aren't calling preflop raises with ace of spades, 5 of diamonds, right? So it's probably going to be either a good flush draw or a reasonable made hand, like a king or a 9. Maybe a hand like pocket 10s. That's certainly reasonable. River is the 7 of spades. Actually, I had someone ask me this in a coaching call I do for my inner circle. You can check that out at pokercoaching.com/inner circle, where they asked, in situations like this, when you do have a marginal flush, should we just keep betting with the idea that we're going to fold if we get raised, thinking that our opponents will sometimes hero call us, or often hero call us if they have any pair? Now, you may say, why would someone call with a pair when there's 4 spades on the board? It's important to note that, in general, I'm going to have a flush card in my hand about 40% of the time, which means if I'm betting with all my unpaired, or all my non-flush hands, and all my flush hands, I'm going to have a bluff 60% of the time. If I'm bluffing 60% of the time, obviously my opponent should be calling because they're getting good pot odds. They only need to be good 33% if I pot it, and they're going to be good 60%. However, I'm not betting every single non-flush hand. Like say I have a set here, I'm definitely not betting. So that kind of messes with the equation. But if I was sitting here with some non-flush hand somehow, I don't know how I'd have it, but say I did have some non-flush hand, I would bluff here. So if I am bluffing, I have to make sure I'm not bluffing too often. But like I just said, it's kind of hard to have a non-flush hand here that also does not have a decent pair. In that situation, I want to make sure that I do bluff with the bluffs I have. But at the same time, if I bet this 9-8, I'm hoping my opponent hero calls me, right? And in general, I don't think random tight aggressive players make big hero calls. And also, if you think about the spades my opponent should have in his range, well, it should be mostly good spades, right? He did call my low jack, or my early position raise in the hijack seat, so he's probably not sitting here with like the 6 of spades, right? That's what I'm trying to get called by, 6 of spades or a king. He certainly could have kings, but he probably doesn't have a 6 of spades because he has to have exactly like pocket 6s, 5s, or 4s, right? And that's not that many combinations of hands. It's only 9 combinations that have the spade. Is that right? That may not be right. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 3 combinations of each, I think. My brain's not working right now. We've made a lot of hand videos today. Anyway, not very many. 4 spades, 4 of hearts, 4 spades, 4 diamonds, 4 spades, 4 clubs. Yeah, so 3 of each. There we go. We found it. Okay. Whenever you are going somewhat quickly, we do try to go somewhat quickly in these videos because I know you all have lots to do and I value your time. very easy to sometimes get confused. Whenever you are going through something and you get confused, take your time, think it out, and you'll often find the right play. Or at least you'll figure out something that's pretty close to reasonable. So anyway, do I think a generic tag is going to hero call me here? Probably not. Do I think if I value bet this 9 high flush, I can get called by worse hands very easily? Probably not. So I need to check. And when I check, the question then becomes, do I call if my opponent bets? And I think the answer is very often yes. I know it's a little bit dicey, but again, pot odds, right? In this scenario, some people will always bet big when they have the nuts and small when they're bluffing. Some people do the opposite. They bet big with their bluffs and small when they have the flush. But again, this is one of these scenarios where if the opponent just bluffs pretty much ever, if he bets like a third pot, we just need to call here. Our 9-8 of spades does block some of the random hands our opponent may have, but not really, I guess. We're straight up hero calling. We're calling stations. And don't be afraid to be a calling station. However, it just goes check, check, we win. This is a situation where if the opponent does have a 9 or does have like pocket 10s with no spade, he probably should bluff. And the question is do people actually do that? Just because someone should do something does not mean they will do something. It's very important to realize that, right? And if your opponent is just straightforward, non-creative player, you should check fold here. But if your opponent is good, perhaps overly aggressive player, it's an easy check call. So keep your opponents in mind. Do not make the same play in this scenario every time. Doing that is a big mistake. People send me hands very much like this one and say, okay, what do I do if he bets the river? And the answer is, well, it depends a whole lot on your opponent here. So don't be a robot. Always think about the exact situation you're in and adjust accordingly. That's going to be it for this hand for Poker News. I want to thank you all for being here. Again, you can check out the Inner Circle I discussed at pokercoaching.com/inner circle. There we have lots of office hours where you can call in and ask me your questions live. I answer them, give you real-time feedback, and you can also listen to all the other Inner Circle members' calls, and it's a great way to learn. So thanks again. Good luck in your games, and I'll be back next week with another hand from this $1,500 buy-in shootout.